So, what happens when a platform that's built on this huge promise of absolute free speech runs headfirst into the messy, complicated reality of human behavior? Today, we're diving into the story of Reddit's evolution. It's a journey from a total anything-goes Wild West to a much more curated and, often controversial digital space. And it's a story that was basically forged in the fire of the communities that pushed the platform right to its breaking point. This quote right here, from a moderator of a subreddit that was eventually banned, really just gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It perfectly sums up the central question that has pretty much defined Reddit's entire history. Where do you draw the line between user freedom and the platform's responsibility? To really understand the battles that were about to come, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning, when Reddit was basically just a blank canvas for community, and, as it turns out, for a whole lot of controversy. So in its early years, Reddit was really just a simple link-sharing site. But in 2008, everything changed. By opening up subreddit creation to literally everyone, Reddit unleashed this absolute flood of user-generated communities. I mean, they covered every single topic you could possibly imagine. And some, as we're about to see, that really pushed the boundaries of what anyone considered acceptable. But, this explosion of user freedom, well, it came with a pretty dark side. That anything-goes attitude inevitably led to what you could call crises of conscience. These were the moments when the platform was forced to confront the very real-world consequences of its hands-off approach. The first major shockwaves really hit in 2011 and 2012. You had subreddits like r/jailbait, which sexualized minors, and r/creepshots, which was all about sharing creepy, non-consensual photos of women. And look, this wasn't just some edgy humor. This was content that caused actual, real-world harm. And it sparked this national outcry that Reddit just couldn't ignore anymore. And then, this whole abstract debate about what people do online, it became terrifyingly real in 2012. The news site Gawker doxed the moderator of r/creepshots, a guy known only as Violent Acreus. By revealing his real-world identity, it just ignited this firestorm of a debate about anonymity, about online justice, and whether your actions online should have consequences offline. So, was doxing the right move? Well, on one side you have people like Jude Doyle, who argued it was just a sensationalist stopgap. The thinking here is that, sure, you can out one person, but that doesn't really fix the underlying culture that lets these communities pop up in the first place. But not everyone saw it that way. On the other side of the coin, you had Damon Pooter at PC Magazine, who was incredibly blunt about it, shed no tears for Violent Acreus. From this point of view, the harm that moderator caused was so bad that outing him was a totally justifiable, maybe even necessary response. And then there was a third perspective, from Dana Boyd, who warned that this whole thing basically gives a green light to internet vigilantism, mob justice. It was just a super messy, complicated situation with no easy answers, and it really forced Reddit to start figuring out some new ways to deal with the darkness that was growing on its platform. So, faced with this impossible choice between total anarchy and total censorship, Reddit had to find some kind of middle ground. And this is what led to what they called the Quarantine Toolbox, an attempt to contain these problem communities without just wiping them off the map completely. So what is a quarantine exactly? Well, it's a policy they brought back in 2015, and the whole idea is to make these offensive communities a lot less visible without having to bring down the ban hammer. You can kind of think of it as putting a subreddit in a digital penalty box, just isolating it from the rest of the site. Okay, so here's how it works. First, if you try to go to one of these subreddits, you hit a warning page. You have to physically click to say, yes, I want to see this. Second, the community gets cut off from the rest of Reddit. It won't pop up in searches or on the popular feeds. And third, it can't make any money. The whole point is to build these walls around it, making it way harder for people to just stumble upon it by accident. But here's the thing, for a lot of Reddit's most toxic communities, a quarantine was just a slap on the wrist. The pressure kept building from the public and from inside the company itself, and that brought us into what I like to call the era of the ban, where Reddit started drawing much firmer and more permanent lines in the sand. The first really big move came in 2015 when they banned r/fatpeoplehate, which was this huge, notoriously cruel community. This was a massive moment. It was a clear signal that under its new policies, Reddit's tolerance for targeted harassment was officially over. Fast forward 2 years and the hammer came down on Reddit incels. The community, which stood for involuntary celibates, had become this hotbed for misogyny and posts that were straight up inciting violence against women. Getting rid of it was another clear step in defining what kind of speech was just not okay on the platform. And a lot of the time, it was real-world events that forced Reddit's hand. In 2019, after the horrible Christchurch shooting, r/WatchPeopleDie actually hosted footage of the attack. They were banned for glorifying violence, and it was this really direct, sobering link between a global tragedy and a platform making a policy decision. Then, in the supercharged political atmosphere of 2020, one of the site's most famous and controversial communities, r/TheDonald, was finally banned. It had been quarantined for a while, but Reddit eventually shut it down for constantly breaking rules and picking fights with other communities. A move that, as you can imagine, some people celebrated and others condemned. And more recently, in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, r/NoNewNormal, a major hub for misinformation, got banned. The official reason was something called braiding, which is basically organizing to go interfere with other subreddits. This was a big deal because it showed that how a community acted towards the rest of the site was now a major factor in whether it got to stick around. And let's be clear, we are not talking about small French groups here. r/FatPeopleHate had over 150,000 subscribers. r/CringeAnarchy had more than 400,000. These bans weren't just symbolic. They affected hundreds of thousands of users, and really, fundamentally, changed the entire landscape of the platform. So, after all these bans and all this cleanup, you might think the problem's solved, right? Well, not quite. As we're about to see, this is a debate that never really ends. And that line between what's acceptable and what's not, it's always moving. So yeah, has Reddit finally cleaned house for good? Not even close. There are still plenty of really contentious communities that are active right now. You've got r/Kotaku in Action, a hub for the Gamergate movement that was known for harassing women in the video game industry. You've got r/TheRedPill, which critics described as a misogynistic community. And there's r/Sino, which actively promotes denial of the Uyghur oppression in China. So yeah, the debate over where to draw that line is very, very much alive. And this is the tightrope that Reddit is constantly walking. On one side, you have its original ideals of open conversation, even dissent. But on the other, you have this growing pressure to stamp out hate, harassment, and things that cause real-world harm. It's a balancing act that has no easy answers. Which really brings us to the fundamental question of our digital age. Who should be deciding the rules for our online spaces? Should it be the tech companies that own them, the users who live in them, or maybe the governments that regulate them? There is no simple solution here, and it's a question that is absolutely going to define the future of the internet. What do you think?